Hey everybody, welcome back to the second week of the Sahmati Account Aggregator Hackathon. Thank you for tuning in again. Really excited to have you guys back and for today's masterclasses. So I'm sure there'll be some housekeeping announcements and stuff that we'll do in between our masterclass sessions. But for now, let's jump straight into it. I'm really excited and really grateful that we have Sasi here with us. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Sasikumar Ganesan. Sasi was actually, he's the Vice President of Platform for August Networks. August is a company that's running the certification ecosystem for the Account Aggregator framework. Prior to that, he was the security architect of Aadhaar and a co-author of eSign. He's also the author of that Forward Secrecy GitHub project that's part of the Hack Bible resources. So when we say masterclass, here's what we mean. So Sasi, thank you so much for being here with us today, and over to you. And guys, some applause please for our speaker. Virtual applause. All these emojis are for you, Sasi. So thank you, Sasi, and I'm handing it over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Ariman. Okay, guys. So today's session is about our cryptography interoperability that we have built in. And obviously, most of you have already used the GitHub version that we have put at open source, the code that I have contributed for the Account Aggregator ecosystem. So what I'll do is I have a very small presentation. I'll walk you through the presentation, and I'll also speak about some best practices on the certification and what all covers in the certification, and also some privacy and design aspects of the solution. Okay, so I'm going ahead to share the screen. Okay, guys. We'll speak about the account aggregators, security design, privacy, and what we cover as a part of the certification as well. And account aggregator security is something little unique in its nature. That the design for it has started from the day one when we put across the paper for account aggregation. So if you would see quite a lot of cryptography being used in the part of security. I'll also explain why we chose a certain form of cryptography versus the other forms, and also some of the pitfalls that usually we come across in the cryptographic designs, and how in this case we kind of leapfrog into the best design that we could put across for the country altogether. There is a security by design inside account aggregator system. There is also a security by default in place. There is also a specific trust factors that are built in every player that you indulge in this entire ecosystem, whether it's an FIP who's involved and an FIU. So every person is a trusted party in nature, and we kind of trust them using a certain mechanisms which are built in. Some of you would have used it within your current work that you've been in. This may be a redo of those things, but I'm explaining the overall view of how these things came into existence to begin with, and how we actually got in.
Okay, guys. So looks like we might have a technical issue with Sasi there. So not sure if I'm still online or not. If you can hear me, spam some emojis, please. Okay, super. So I'm going to take a short break, and we'll locate Sasi and then get back. Hang tight.
Hey guys, the drop in connection. So the security by design, as you have seen in a lot of these protocols, you would do it. Our expectation is everybody within the ecosystem understands why and how these protocols are designed, and why we choose a certain cryptography versus other layers.
Sorry, just to interrupt quickly, Sasi. Could you reshare your screen, please? I don't think it's visible.
Oh, okay. We did say it is shared. Let me try to reshare it. Can you see it?
The audience is saying yes, but I can just see a black window. So I'm not.
Okay.
Okay, so people in the audience say they can see it. So I mean that's the important thing. So
Okay.
we'll carry on then.
Okay. Sure. Sure. Okay, that's what the design is a very important factor, and I would highly recommend that you guys also do the same thing within your application, and also push every of your partners to actually follow certain design by security, and a lot of best practices are defined out here. You could use that by default. What I mean by default is basically quite a lot of us are used to configurations within our systems. We tend to use quite a lot of configurations. All we recommend is by default ensure your configuration is with the best form of security that is available. Don't go with the lowest amount of security and then increase it with configuration. Rather do it reverse, and trust every single component that you interact with. Please ensure there is some kind of a trust that you can establish. There is some kind of a token or a certificate that gets shared across this system, so that you could actually kind of trust the particular system which is involved. Now, I'll quickly jump into the cryptography that is used in the account aggregator ecosystem. I'm predominantly assuming quite a lot of you are familiar, at least with the first basic cryptography in place. So, with that assumption, I'm quickly jumping into the account aggregator ecosystem. We are predominantly a PKI-based structure based on a public key cryptography. Or a public key infrastructure to begin with, we tend to use quite a lot of things from the PKI, but there are a little bit changes here and there to actually support the latest technologies and latest support of cryptography into this layer to help us a lot, because it's not just confidentiality. We are also looking at certain level of anonymity in certain cases, so that the communication between two parties can also happen a little more anonymous, and legal aspects also comes into a lot play, because we want to ensure every data that is being shared is also legally validatable and trustable in nature. Okay, and every key exchange as a standard, as an open standard, we have tried to make all our key exchange at the public key level. Okay, to be at an X509 encoded spec, and you're free to look at the GitHub code that is out there, wherein we would have defined every public key to be moved into an X509 spec, and then we would be transmitting over the line. So when we say public key, you should always assume within this ecosystem, it's going to be X509 encoded spec. So remember, it's not an X509 certificate. There's quite difference between a certificate and an encoded spec. The encoding is defined as how you actually keep the keys, and what's the format in which you keep the keys. While a certificate really means it can identify either an individual or a domain or something. So it kind of goes the next layer to actually identify, while the encoding just says the format in which you put through the keys. Okay, and there's quite a lot of ECC that we use here compared to the other ecosystems. One of the reason is we want to be obviously faster, take advantage of the smaller set of keys that are available, I'm not sure how many of you know about the ECC and their respective issues. Quite a lot of ECC curves are not really safe in nature. When I say safe in nature, we expect that that's potentially over kind of tampered with a certain government or a state sponsored mechanism. So we have tried our best not to use any such mechanism within our solution. We choose a curve called 25119. It's a very, very unique curve. We will look at the properties in few slides from now. It's a very interesting curve with an interesting property. Kind of helps a lot in the anonymous way of communication, as well as helps a lot in terms of bringing in the stability and the security that we potentially need for an ECC kind of a nature. Okay, and we also follow a specific technique when we do a key exchange between the entities. We call that as forward secrecy. While it's a very common aspect for the last 5 to 8 years, forward secrecy has been more upfront in its layer. Predominantly today, almost all browsers use that as the first form of communication. We will also see some more details about forward secrecy. And I think obviously most of you would have known about Diffie-Hellman, but I'll also give a layman's view of Diffie-Hellman to give an idea of how Diffie-Hellman actually works. But Diffie-Hellman is as old as RSA is. It's extremely old algorithm in reality. It's one of the best known mechanism to actually share keys between two entities, and we have pretty much used DHE in a lot of our key exchange mechanism. So it's a little complex cryptography, and obviously you're more than welcome to look at the code that's in the open source, but I'll keep explaining why certain aspects do the way it does. So after all of this key exchange, we still don't trust that we could simply use the keys as it is. So what we have gone ahead and done is we kind of took that to a next stage, that after a key is really derived, we again derive it using a HKDF, which is an extremely complex hashing algorithm over which you can derive keys with the nuns and the keys that are being exchanged. So that the key is very, very unique to the session that is being established. So we want to be very, very specific key derivation to the session that we are creating. And the entire ecosystem, all the communications, we are expecting it to be JWT signed. People who have started using sandboxes and APIs would have already noticed that. JWT is a well-known standard, and I think it doesn't deserve a big explanation. It's a very simple JSON base64 format with a header, payload, and signature. Extremely simple enough that can be taken care. Now, I'm jumping on quickly into some basics of cryptography so that you understand why such an importance is given out to the algorithms that we selected and we do so. So if you see here, I'm listing down 3 images. In no way I'm telling that any of these images are secure. Okay, I'm just giving you a sample of cryptographic algorithms properties within the system. So quite a lot of time we don't understand the properties behind a cryptographic algorithm, where and how we could potentially use it. And this is a classic case. A wrong usage could potentially result in any of this nature. So if you see here, we have an original image, we have an encrypted image with a certain encoding, certain encryption and encoding modes, which could result in not really making a random image, but rather could reveal patterns of encryptions. While it's not absolute, but you could still see the patterns which are visible. So it is essential that we choose the right cryptography in nature. And the third image is a random information, but random in the frame of visual randomness. But is it really random is still a very different question altogether. Which is also something that you could look at, but I'm giving it a visual representation so that you're aware of why such an importance to a specific cryptographic algorithm is being enforced in this particular ecosystem. Okay, I'll quickly jump on to the DHE and how DHE works. I'm not getting into the math model behind the scene. We could get in, but I thought it would be a lot more easier to give a pictorial view of a lot of these cryptographies, because a lot of times we don't tend to see we don't get to visualize when it is a math formula within our respective minds. So DHE is think of DHE this way: in a communication between two people, if the channel over which you are communicating is not a very secure channel. Now, how do we make sure both these entities, both these people kind of derive the same keys, right? DHE provides a very unique mathematical property over which you can derive the same key by speaking certain code words between each other. And the code words are okay to be completely publicly known. But when you derive the end result, nobody knows, and magically both of you would derive the same number back. Okay, that's the whole idea. And if you look at it, I'm representing that using a paint model. So you kind of combine two, 3 paints to get to a specific color. Okay, and if you see here, there's a common paint that both of you go through. So you can consider that to be your public key. And each of you have your private keys. okay, which you would see here in the second. So you combine your public and private key pairs, you get a specific color within yourself, okay, which is a specific key that you can transport. Now you again mix it with the secret, you get a color code which is equivalent to the same secret and the color code. If you look at it, you will realize that we know the RGB values is what is combined to get the results, right? In a color kind of a mechanism, and mixing the right color codes would always come back in irrespective of the order of the mix, right? Irrespective of how you mix the order, the end result remains the same. So similar way, in this particular cryptographic scenario with the DHE, we are looking at a math formula. Irrespective of order in which you did the formula, the end result becomes a unique secret key that you could potentially use. So both of you, in your memory, in your respective server's memory, you created a key which looks exactly similar in both the places, and it looks almost equivalent to magical. And if you look at it, somebody who's in between this entire scenario, looking at the information that is being shared across both of these entities, only gets this particular orange and this particular blue, and with these two colors he can never derive the secret key. Okay, so that's in the color scenario, and it's exactly similar in our scenario with the DHE as well. And this is the exact reason why we tend to use DHE, because we don't want the entities to keep keys permanently in its persistent storage and use that to encrypt. And the reason for it is potentially forward secrecy, which I would explain from few more slides from now. Okay. Now I spoke about forward secrecy and how forward secrecy is going to help us. So forward secrecy is a very, very unique property on a key agreement. Okay, when I say key agreement, it's between two entities. When they want to speak to each other, it doesn't matter who's in between them. Okay, for example, if an FIP and an FIU has to speak in our terms, and there's an AA who's in between, we don't care whether the data goes through him or it completely goes directly to the FIU, irrespective of the hop points, whether it is one hop point, multiple hop points. The persons who are in between literally can just keep forwarding your data back and forth, but they have no clue what is this information about and what is it really about. Okay, that's the whole criteria over which our communication is fair. And the forward secrecy is a very unique key agreement protocol, wherein a session key that is shared today, right now. Okay, so let's take a classic example. If two parties are communicating with the PKI kind of an infrastructure, you create a secret key, encrypt it with the public key, send it to the party A, which is similar to a PGP kind of a mechanism, and the party B again encrypts the actual data with the secret key and then sends it across. Now, if you see in between this, there was once in the communication, the secret key traveled across from a point A to point B in an encrypted mode. It did transfer across into the other system. Now, if an adversary is looking at this communication, when I say adversary, it's like an attacker who's looking at this communication, and today he doesn't have access to the private key, so he doesn't know about it. But let's assume that he's going to capture this entire packet on the internet and keeps it somewhere stored. 2 years later, the server A is hacked, and the private key within the server A is leaked. Now, what happens to the data that we previously stored? In a PGP kind of a scenario, what happens is now the packet that he has stored 2 years before, a transaction that happened 2 years before, now can be decrypted, which is extremely dangerous when you look at a financial kind of a transaction and privacy related work. It is an extremely dangerous part. So forward secrecy is a very unique property in a cryptographic key agreement, wherein even when such a case occurs in the future, wherein in the future there is a compromise of the private key, you still can't derive the session key that was used, because the previous algorithm that I spoke about, which is the Diffie-Hellman algorithm that I spoke about, has created its own unique key above our channel. Okay, irrespective of the channel, it created its own unique key in memory, communicated for that particular session, and then deleted it completely out of its memory. So an adversary who today collects this information, even at later point in time, cannot go to those servers and retrieve back. So remember that. So it has to be in memory and completely removed out in memory itself, that key is not available. So remember, it's not that forward secrecy protects your data, but it protects the actual shared key between these two entities, so that a compromise somewhere in the future will not result in the data that is in the past or the transaction in the past being compromised. So you could have a very, very safe transaction with the assumption that nobody could break it until even after the key is revealed at a later point in time. Okay, and this is the uniqueness about forward secrecy, and this is how we expect the entire ecosystem to also communicate within its HTTPS layer or TLS layers and other things. Okay. Now, I think quite a lot of you would have had a trouble implementing this curve, and apologies for the trouble, but it is an essential evil in the entire thing. We have open sourced this entire work for the community to help to make sure the community can actually forget the actual implementation and can actually adopt it extremely faster. As of now, the implementation is in Java. Sooner or later, maybe we'll come up with other languages as well. But it's also a microservice, so that way you could absolutely use it without worrying about the language and other parts. It's a completely Dockerized solution that's available. Now, coming back to the curve itself, ECC is an extremely fast cryptographic algorithm, but across the globe, there's quite a lot of researchers who have been pointing out that a lot of the ECC curve that is accepted today as a standard has a unique properties that are hard-coded into the algorithm and must be hard-coded into the algorithm. It's not that the algorithm itself is unsafe, but some of the properties that is accepted as the only certification values, okay, are hard-coded into these algorithms. And the expectation is there are certain countries who could have compromised those values. And that is the reason why they have hard-coded these values, because there is no scientific reason behind hard coding those properties in place. So quite a lot of curves have this problem, and I hope everybody knows what a curve is. A curve is curve and an elliptical. Don't think elliptical means ellipse, or it's not like an ellipse. It's like a if you could draw any kind of line in any way you want on a graph. The XY points becomes the curve, and any point in the curve can be represented by an X and Y axis. Okay, so your curve is not just always like this. It go like this. It can twist. It can turn. It can be completely any way it needs to be. And each of these curves, the algorithms behind them, the quadratic equations behind them are extremely different in nature. And there are quite a lot of curves that are defined. This particular curve that we have selected, which is 251,119, has some very unique and interesting properties, which suits the environment that we are working towards. Okay, one, it kind of avoids implementation related pitfalls. So why is implementation related pitfalls are very essential? Because in the past we have seen that when implementations are not accurate, okay, for
Okay, so yeah, I guess you guys know what's gonna happen. We're gonna take a break and try and get Sasi back and be back in a second. Okay, sorry, we lost you again. So could you please camera screen and then I'll go live again. Okay, let's go.
sorry guys, I think I lost you as well. So if you search in the Google for Infineon RSA prime number, you would see tons of research papers which are explaining how a certain form of implementation of generating a RSA key, Okay, it's not that RSA algorithm itself is weaker or any of that sense, but the way in which you generate a key kind of resulted in the keys being predictable in nature. Obviously, it takes a lot of science to predict it, but absolutely predictable. Okay, which is a dangerous when you build such big solutions across the country's scale. So it was very important that we choose something which avoids any implementation pitfalls, and you would see the curve 25119, irrespective of the libraries we choose to use. The pitfalls are extremely limited in that sense, that you could assume that the person who has implemented this curve most probably at 99% is going to give you better result than the other forms, wherein you are very implementation specific. So that's a big advantage for us, and as an open ecosystem, it's something welcoming for us to use that. Next is this particular curve is also immune to quite a lot of timing attacks. Timing attacks in cryptography is basically you generate a key, and there is a time that it takes to generate a key, and based on the time it took to generate, it is really benefits from the fact that there's not much timing difference that you could ever find to launch a timing related attack. So it's kind of has this unique property. And the best of all with this curve is the fact that the public key of this curve could be a completely any random 32-byte string. So that way you can't take a public key and think that is this part of the curve. Any 32-byte string could be a part of this curve. So that is a very unique property of this curve, and that kind of gives us a very added advantage and an edge towards what we want to try and achieve in the anonymous layers and the cryptography layers. Okay, that is why it is curve 25119. And the other factor is there is also quite a lot of curves in ECC. Unlike RSA, ECC has a cryptography specific curves, signature specific curves and implementations. In this case, we have a single curve which can satisfy both of it, because it's birational in reality, which is very similar to the word isomorphic in sense that you could